We have one more session before lunch, and it's a good one, so you won't regret it. And it'll be pretty quick, and then we'll be heading into lunch straight from here. But please, I'm really excited for this last fireside chat of the morning with Lynn Jurich, who's next to me. Lynn is, of course, the CEO and co-founder of Sunrun, one of the largest residential solar companies in the country, a relatively newly public company. And
yes, let me take a quick drink out of my coffee.
Right. We're going to talk about that. And you know, a company that's been at sort of the forefront of the changes that we've seen over the past 8 years or something in residential solar. So we have a lot to talk about. And as with the other sessions this morning, we'll leave time for a couple of questions at the end. Lynn has to try to catch a flight like 20 minutes after this session ends or something. So she's going to sprint out the back. So if you want to ask questions, make sure to do it on the stage. Lynn, let's start with talking a little bit about the evolution of Sunrun's business over the years. So Sunrun was an early pioneer in residential solar, sort of invented the residential solar lease. You guys started as a partner network company. You were providing financing and other services to installer partners. And then over time bought Rec Solar's residential business as well as its distribution business. Now are vertically integrated, install yourselves, but also maintain this partner network. Can you talk a little bit about the thinking behind that transition, and to the extent that you think it reflects anything broader about the market over time, what is it?
Yeah, sure. It's interesting. You know, when we started the company, we had this vision to sell solar as a service to homeowners. And we had seen what SunEdison had just been out getting their fundraising, and we looked at that and said, that's the model, and that's the model for consumers. So let's figure out how we do that. You know, I had a background in finance, as did my partner. And so the way we decided to go after it first was, let's solve that business model problem. Let's figure out how to get these big tax equity investors interested in pools of assets, so thousands of homeowners as opposed to, you know, a single project that they could underwrite. And that was really the original vision. So we looked out at the landscape and said, there are already a lot of solar installers that are great at what they can do. So why don't we figure that out and then partner with the installers? And in fact, so Ed and I were at Stanford. We were in business school at the time when we were working on this. And so the first installer I cold called, you know, from my dorm room was Solar City. So I cold called Solar City. Lynn and I picked up the phone and I said, I have an idea for you. We're going to launch a residential solar PPA. He said, I'm very interested, you know, come to the office. And you know, that's sort of the early story. But, you know, in just getting to how we sort of evolved the business model, it really wasn't, a lot of people will look at it and say this was a strategy shift, but it really wasn't a strategy shift. The strategy from the very beginning of the company was, let's figure out how to deploy this on as many consumer rooftops as possible. Sunrun as an organization, we want to own the pieces of the value chain that have scale advantages. So for us in the beginning, that was the capital, that was figuring out the brand, that was owning the customer relationship, that was figuring out the financing, that was the software in order to process these applications and design these systems more cost effectively. And so that was all what we built. And we continued to expand a network of local solar installers who would sell for us and build for us, and did that very effectively. And you know, so that was the first, I would call, 4 or 5 years of the company. And that really enabled us to get to market leadership in a very capital light way. You know, meaning we used a lot less equity capital to get our business to a scale than, you know, peer companies who were vertically integrated needed to do. At that point in time, we looked at the market and said, you know what? There's also an opportunity to have scale advantages now in customer acquisition and construction. So it's time for us, the market's mature enough where we want to also own that piece of the value chain. And by the way, getting proficient in that helps our local partners. And so what we did was we looked at all of our partner companies and we purchased REC Solar, which we felt had the highest quality, the best customer experience, and the lowest cost structure. So it was a no-brainer for us to partner up with them. We brought them on board, and so we continue now to have the direct, more vertically integrated business. And then we also have our partner business, which is, thriving, growing at above market rates. And those partners benefit from all the scale investments we've made. So it's almost like they're virtually vertically integrated. So I believe they have, so that's kind of been the evolution. So I think, and then just to kind of wrap on the point of the broader industry evolution, I think what you also will see is in early industries, when there's a lot of coordination cost, sometimes it's more cost effective and you can get to scale faster vertically integrated. But then as the industry matures and people start to specialize, and there are people who are better at customer acquisition and there are people who are better at local construction, it may horizontalize again. And so I think, a lot of people are saying, okay, it's all, is the writing on the wall, it's vertical integration is the fastest growth. And I don't believe that. I think you want a flexible model as this industry evolves. And I think we're in a strong position right now because we do have that vertical integration piece that's growing very quickly, taking share. But we also have this very complementary partner piece, which reaches a whole new set of customers that the vertical integration does not. So I think that leaves us in this place with nice broad reach, as well as the side benefit of having less fixed costs in the business, more variable costs, more flexibility in a market that has proven to be quite dynamic.
Horizontalize is a word that I have never heard and plan to use now. Though, I think the standard knock on the model now is actually not so dissimilar from the knock on, a few years ago there was a big trend in the US solar market of module manufacturers getting into project development. It's actually kind of back now, but it disappeared for a little while. But when they were doing it, back when SunPower and First Solar were first doing it, and then all the Chinese manufacturers were getting into the game as well, the argument against it was basically you have a channel conflict here. You're competing with your customers, at least in some cases. So how do you navigate the channel conflict issue when Sunrun could go do an installation, but just as easily a Sunrun partner could go do the same installation?
Yeah, it's a good question. I would also argue that part of why it didn't work in that situation was just core competency. It's just what are you uniquely as a company good at doing? And I think that service is a very different business than manufacturing. So I just think it is. It's a different investor base as well. But to answer your question, we honestly don't see much channel conflict. So you hear some noise of it, but when you look at the facts, how many customers receive a quote from Sunrun and a Sunrun partner? It's well less than 5%.
Why is that? Do you operate in different geographies, or what's
again, because it's, one, we watch it. So,
right.
We don't add all the partners who want to be Sunrun partners, so we're very careful about making sure that we're protecting them and they're advantaged working with us. But also I think it's because, again, we're so underpenetrated. And I'd love, hopefully we'll get into like the demand side of this because that's
right.
been in the news, but we're so underpenetrated right now. We're still less than 1% of households. And the people who, when we have our direct vertical integrated business where we're buying leads on the internet, where we're advertising, where we're competing with, Solar Cities of the world, that's a different consumer than the consumer who thinks about this as a home improvement. They want to go to their local contractor. They want to work with a local company. And so we just don't reach. It's reaching a different customer base is the main reason.
So one would think over time then, as we get to higher penetrations and as customers get a little bit more savvy and start soliciting multiple bids where they don't today, something will transition. Is your expectation, I guess you said horizontalization, can I use that? Is the assumption that ultimately the sort of partner network starts to take on an increasing role in your mix, or where do you see it heading moving forward?
We look at it market by market. I think one of the dangers of this industry is that we're looking, this is a local market kind of business. It's a local utility market business. It's a local business. The construction rules are different. And I think one of the things we fall victim to is to simplify it too much. Oh, there's just one overall cost structure. You have to be at 250 watt. Well, that's not exactly true. It's different market by market, and the profit is different market by market, and you actually have to look at it and build your business market by market. So that's how we approach the model. I think the practical facts are our business is about half and half today. Our direct business is growing faster than the partner business. So just by virtue of those trends, I think you'll see the direct business will take a little bit more share. But the other thing we're seeing is, again, back to the horizontalization, we're seeing that it's not quite so clear cut. So now we may have a situation where we have some partners who are very strong at lead generation, some partners who are very good at build. And so we're actually managing the utilization across a number of partners, our capacity, partners' capacity, and we believe that it puts us in the best, long-term cost structure and the most flexible business model.
Let's transition to talking a little bit about the public markets and the world that you now operate within. We'll use this as a backdoor way to talk a little bit about the ITC as well. What's your experience been so far being the CEO of a public company? What has that changed? And certainly you've become a public company at sort of an inopportune time within solar equities in general. So what's your assessment of investors and what they think about solar and why they're wrong right now?
Sure, they're definitely wrong.
Yeah.
Many of you guys may know I had a baby 4 months ago. And I started the roadshow for the public company 1 month after the baby was born. So it was rough. It was very rough. I was nursing. I brought the baby along. I actually brought my mother along on the roadshow, so it was sort of cool. We had like 3 generations there at NASDAQ. And I have to say, that baby Blythe, was the best behaved person on the entire roadshow, including the market, including the investors. So she was a true champ. I think first of all, the difference in running the business hasn't been that great. I think meaning it hasn't been that severe, the difference. I think in many ways it's great to be a public company. I love, for 2 reasons. The first reason is that I love the pressure that it gives on the organization to deliver every single quarter. I think we all know that we're marching down this cost curve and we need to deliver every single quarter. So the fact that it's more visible, that more of the company sees that they execute against targets, that's important, and that's a huge value to us. And a good forcing mechanism. The second thing is it gives us a stage to talk about this industry and show investors why they're wrong. This industry has so much volatility. And part of the problem, why it's so volatile, and part of the reason why the market has been hit so hard is not even related to solar. It's just energy prices. With energy prices dropping, with energy investors losing money, people are getting redemptions, they're pulling capital out of the market. That hurts us. Well, that's a problem for us because we are not educating investors outside of the energy market to want to buy into this industry. We got to educate the growth investors, the long-term investors that want to hold these stocks, who believe in the long-term macro trends. We need to bring those people into the market. If you look at who owns these stocks right now, it is not those investors. It is trading firms predominantly, hedge funds, energy investors that have all been just kind of hurt over the last couple of quarters, and that's not serving us well. So I love the opportunity to talk about, explain why there are simple metrics to understand in this business. We have a very simple way to think about, here's how much each one of our customers is worth. So let's look at, so we call that the net present value of our customer. So let's take a customer, look at all the income streams we're going to get from them over that 20 years, subtract out all the costs, discount it all the today's dollars, and that's your customer value. Then it's very easy for investors to say, okay, let me see how much of that you're originating each year. So if you'll look at our guidance, we've said we're going to install 205 megawatts this year. So you say, okay, 200 megawatts, $1 a watt per customer. Okay, I can think about how to value this company. That should be very simple, very easy for people to understand. We're still having to educate, though, and the way we're currently being valued right now has a massive disconnect between where our valuations are and the value we're actually creating in each one of these customers.
You sort of opened the door to this question, so I'll ask it. You were talking about the value of the customer, and one of the questions that I know investors have had about the way that you value the customer is the question of what happens at the end of the term of the PPA, where you assume a pretty high renewal rate for those customers. Can you walk through the thinking behind 20 years from now or 17 years from now for some customers, they're going to have this system up on the rooftop, the PPA is going to expire, the lease is going to expire, and they're going to have to choose between renewing and not renewing and maybe doing something else that's new at the time. What's going to make them renew then?
Yeah, it's a great question. I love that question. So first of all, again, the way we're describing this, I think, is hurting the industry. So we're saying the way we're describing this is that customers will extend the contract at a 10% discount to the year 20 rate.
Right.
When in fact our contracts say it's a 10% discount to what the then utility price is.
Which could be even higher.
Which could be even higher.
Yeah.
You think of our annual inflator on our, and so this is a little nitty gritty and I'll get through this quickly, but if we're only charging 1.5% each year and utility rates are increasing 3 to 4, right, there's actually going to be an even bigger savings. So I think we're actually conservative on our renewal assumption. The facts are this equipment lasts for 30 to 35 years. We know that. It has been tested. It has been around since the 70s. The equipment will last. We've been operating already 9 years. The other question is, can the customer realistically get that system removed and another system put on for a cheaper value than extending the contract? For a working system, debatable. If in fact, because so much of the cost is in the customer acquisition and the labor, if we're able to install cheaper than just leaving the panels on, this is a high-class problem because we are so penetrated, because we are in so many markets if the economics work out that way. And then I think the third point that's important to note is that consumers extend contracts. If you look at industries like alarms, an average consumer will sign a 3-year contract, but an average contract will be 9 years. You can get financing against 6 years, against 9 years. That's because consumers, you think about yourself, like many consumers still pay for AOL email addresses. That's my favorite one. Why are you still paying for an AOL email address? Because it's just easy and you just extend it. And that's what we're going to be in a position where we have significant savings. We know the equipment still works. And these customers are going to be extending them.
Yeah, I will say, I'm somewhat skeptical that 20 years from now that you're going to have as high a renewal rate as often gets assumed. But I did just renew a 2-year contract with AT&T for my phone at a stupid high price.
Exactly.
That, it makes no sense because it's just easy. Like inertia is real,
Yeah.
So I give that some credence.
I would, yeah.
Yeah, just because I'm lazy,
I could go on,
right?
But yeah, I won't. I won't bore you guys.
Right. So let's talk about public policy for a second and regulatory issues and things like that. I think there's 2 that I'd like to cover. The 2 big ones, I guess. One being the ITC and the other being net energy metering and rate reform types of things. So we'll start with the ITC. You were saying backstage as we were talking ahead of time, you think the industry is sort of talking wrong about the ITC. This is your opportunity. This is the industry.
I do, guys.
Tell me what they're doing.
I don't think we should be saying it's not getting renewed. I really don't. I think, can I get a, yeah? Okay. We should not be saying that. There is a lot of support for this. The policy is working. It is good. We have Republican support. There is a very strong possibility this gets renewed. A very strong possibility. The people in the industry should not be the people saying, oh, we don't need it. Oh, let's forget it. We've already given up on Washington. No, that's a self-fulfilling prophecy. We can get this done. And the facts are Washington wants to make an even playing field. The argument that you look at fossil fuels and nuclear, over the last 6 decades, they have had 8 times the subsidies of solar and wind. 8 times. They want an even playing field. Let's make an even playing field. And I think that message is going to resonate very strongly. I think it already is. And so I think we just need to get on message here that's what's going to happen. We have to prepare our businesses for 10%, of course. We got to prepare our businesses for 10%, but let's not shoot ourselves in the foot.
Right. I will note, I'll make a plug right now since we're on that anyway, that in case you didn't get the little cards, tomorrow morning at 8:30, we're going to start a little early because we're going to have a conversation with Ron Resch from SIA, who is currently in D.C. meeting with Republican senators this week. So we're going to hear a little bit more detail on, right, which is a good sign, on where this might head.
I mean, one of the big surprises for me, there's been a lot of surprises starting this company. So we started 8 years ago. Every single person said this business model wouldn't work. I did my research. I was a student. I called people at PG&E. I called utilities. I called people in solar, and they patted me on the head and said, oh, cute little girl, like, you will get smoked. This will not work. Residential PPA will not work. That was universally what we were faced with when we started this company. And one of the things that's most surprised me is how supportive the Republicans are, bipartisan. I mean, it's incredible. You look at like the Tea Party support for this. I mean, this is fundamentally American. This is competition. When does competition not lower prices for consumers? Never. Competition is good. Competition is good. Clean energy is good. Choice is good. Why would the government stop supporting that?
Okay, so that's a good segue into talking about net energy metering and stuff, because you're talking about competition being good, and that's one of the sort of lines that you guys and others and Task have used in a lot of these regulatory battles over changes to NEM or changes to rate structures. If you could step back for a moment and just sort of look at the 20-some states where you've seen this play out in one form or another, how would you assess the solar industry's success rate thus far, and how do you see it trending over a slightly longer period of time? Is your assumption retail NEM is the world we're going to live in for the foreseeable future, or will there be some transition?
That is my assumption. Thank you. Thank you for asking the question. Again, something I think there's a lot of noise on. Let's take a step back. There's little battles here and there, but let's take a step back and look at like the overarching track record. We are 40-0 with net metering battles. There are more states now, after 3 years of utilities fighting net metering, there are more states today with net metering than there were 3 years ago. Conservative states, South Carolina, Mississippi is conserving it. And fundamentally, when you look at the independent research, all independent research shows that there is a benefit to all consumers from rooftop solar, from net metering. At these penetration levels, and so we can talk about that, but at these penetration levels and penetration levels that sustain for a long period of time, there is a benefit. Now, over the very, very, very long run, we have to figure it out. I mean, we have to figure out, we're moving from a 100-year-old centralized industry to a distributed grid. We're going to have to figure out what those business models look like. And so there will be evolution, so I'm, not here to predict how that plays out, but I am confident that retail net energy metering will sustain for the medium term.
Yeah, I mean, I think the 40-0 thing is an interesting one because it's true to an extent, I think. In a lot of these battles, the solar industry, or at least the solar advocates who are pushing for the continuation of retail NEM have won out. There are some examples on the other side of the equation, like SRP in Arizona. HECO now has a grid supply tariff that's not full retail. But then on the other hand, you have places like Wisconsin, where so that was a loss for the solar advocates that now a court, it was a district court maybe, has overturned, and we'll
Correct.
See where that's.
They've
gonna
overturned,
head.
and I suspect the same thing will happen in Hawaii. So just quickly on those points. So let's just look at Hawaii, for example. Hawaii is a very specific place with very high saturation. If we had the same amount of saturation as Hawaii did in California and in the rest of the kind of 15 markets that that residential solar is large in, the amount of homes that would be built with solar is so enormous, and the amount of net present value that would be created is close to $50 billion. Sorry, I'm thinking net present value because you asked what is a public company done to me. I have an earnings call coming up in 2 weeks. So $50 billion and millions of rooftop solar if we were to get to the same penetration level as Hawaii. So I look at Hawaii as a strong a strong signal of how much consumer demand there is for this and how much penetration we're going to have. Not only that, but I think the Hawaii decision, for the same reasons that Wisconsin got overturned, I think the same thing will happen in Hawaii. Secondarily, the economics still work for a product in Hawaii.
Let me ask you one sort of final question of my own, and then I'll open it up for a couple of questions from all of you, which is, you mentioned that you had a baby right before going on this roadshow. You're a female CEO of a solar company, of which there are too few. What's been your experience in terms of the gender dynamics both in the solar industry and then now in sort of capital markets as the world that you have to exist in?
Yeah, it's interesting. I've always sort of been a rarity. I was in the capital markets before, so my career before starting this company, I was a venture capitalist. So I'm quite used to it. I actually have never worked in a gender balance situation. It's really unfortunate. I consider it my mission to be a role model and to have a company where women are able to succeed and be successful. So it's like very important. Thank you guys. Thank you guys. I really do appreciate that. For a long time, I was feeling really young, until I went on I was feeling like not only I was a young and a woman, but then I went on my roadshow. And let me tell you, it was the first time in my life I went into all those guys that work at these investment firms, and they're all guys. I think I met 2 women on the roadshow. 2 women out of maybe like 140 investors, and I was older than everybody.
So, but I mean, I guess just to dig into that a little bit more, specifically within the solar industry, I mean, what is your sense of is the gender disparity that there no doubt still is in the solar industry, is that a relic of the solar industry being part of an energy industry that is also super, uneven, or what is it?
Yeah, I do. I think so. I mean, I think it's just like, the intersection of what we do, energy, finance, engineering, are areas where women are underrepresented. And so it's just really important for all women to just be visible, show people that they can be there. I mean, we had these high school kids, underprivileged high school kids, come into the company. I stood up and gave a presentation to them. They all looked and they just started laughing when they found out that I was the CEO. Laughing. It wasn't even in their realm of possibility that a woman could be CEO. And a woman pulled me aside, and she was this like lovely like Latina girl, and she just said, "You are so inspiring. I had no idea a woman could be CEO." I mean, this kind of stuff still happens all the time. It's unbelievable. So we just need to get out there. We need to be more visible, and we need to promote our women, in the company.
Great. All right, we have time for a couple of questions from the audience, if there are any. Raise your hand. I see one just back over there. Right there. There's a mic coming around to you. Put your hand back up again for 1 second. There it is. See him?
Hi, Lynn. Thanks for being here. And my name is Bodie Burgess. I'm with Kann and Company. Just a quick question about the direction. So most of the industry right now is the third-party solar leasing model. Do you see the trend moving more towards home ownership of the systems? Excuse me. And what does that mean for your business in terms of moving or being flexible enough to look at that as if that's the direction that it evolves? And in particular, if ITC goes away and those sort of antiquated financial mechanisms to get solar financing for homes, for homeowners, starts to change, how does that affect your business?
Yeah, sure, great question. We haven't seen so first of all, we do offer cash and loans. So we're going to offer what the consumer wants. First and foremost, we're very consumer-centric. You have to be to make this, successful. So but even though we've offered that, we haven't seen much shift in the demand. It's still roughly kind of 70-30 when you just look at when you look at what consumers want. And the reality is there's a small subset of consumers who just want to own. They hate the word lease. It's offensive. They don't lease their cars. There's a small subset there. But when most people look at the numbers, they find that the leasing is a better deal. You get this service. They don't have to worry about it. The peace of mind is a big factor. And so I don't see that materially changing, particularly as the ITC steps down and there's a 10% credit for us as the owner of the lease system versus the homeowner to purchase it. So I would see almost a shift probably back more towards leasing if the ITC plays out as currently contemplated.
Great. One more question from the audience. If not, I'll ask you one more. You mentioned you guys are in 15 states now, is that right? Mm-hmm. What are the factors that you look at? I mean, when you're trying to, presumably right now you're sitting there and thinking like, I want to enter my 16th state. Mm-hmm. What, if you could sort of bullet point the list of factors that the check boxes you have to check in order to make a state attractive.
Yeah, sure, it's easy. One, consumer savings. So first you have to make sure the economics are there where you can, price. We like to price at least a 10% discount to what prevailing energy rates are to make it compelling for consumers. Two, you need to have a friendly regulatory environment. So a state, like Florida, for example, we'd love to be there, but there are some property tax rules and there's some things that we have to sort of get cleaned up before we go there. And those are really the two big factors. Then, unique to Sunrun, I think, is we have a business model where we can be a little more flexible whether or not we want to enter with our own infrastructure or enter with a partner. So, for example, SRP, you mentioned that. SRP was a utility, we've suffered a loss there. Right. We decided to go, work with a channel primarily in that market, not invest our direct. And I think that, served us, nicely when we think about that. So we also think about, direct versus channel, how that all plays out in the different markets.
And so without naming individual states, do you see any number of states that meet those criteria over the next year? Will we see you guys entering new states?
I think you may. I think if you look, again, ITC is a big wild card.
Right.
So if you look at this year, the focus of our company and many of our peer companies, I think, is going to be grow more in our existing markets. There's a reason we're in these markets first. They have healthier economics. Get your cost structure down in these markets, figure it out, and invest more. Still very underpenetrated, so let's focus on those core markets. On the margin, there'll probably be a few new states that we like, both in 16 and at a 10% credit, but that's the sort of threshold they're going to have to pass. If we get better line of sight into that tax credit holding, which, again, I'm optimistic we will, then you'll see a totally different path.
Right. Great.
And that's a compelling argument as well for, Congress.
For the extension
absolutely.
of the ITC, right?
Absolutely.
Fantastic. Well, please join me in thanking Lynn for
Thanks,
joining
guys.
us this morning.